You know, when we hear about a major historical battle, the story usually ends when the fighting stops. But today, we're going to look at what happened after the Battle of Khaibar. Because the true test of a leader, well, it isn't just about how you win the war. It's about what you do in the quiet moments right after the victory. Okay, let's dive into this. So just imagine this for a second. You've just won. A huge historic victory is yours. And with it comes immense power, incredible wealth, and total control over the people who were, just hours before, your enemies. What do you do next? The choices made right after Khaibar, wow, they are a masterclass in leadership that goes so far beyond the battlefield. And that first test, it came immediately. And it came in the form of wealth. The spoils of war from Khaibar were just enormous, some of the largest the Muslims had ever seen up to that point. How this sudden massive abundance was handled, well, that tells you everything you need to know about the principles guiding this new community. And the scale of it all was staggering. We're not just talking about a few things here. The sources talk about vast quantities of food, grease, oil, honey, all found packed away in the fortresses. There was livestock, furniture, the land itself with all its date palm trees, and even something really unexpected, copies of the Torah. And when the Jews asked for them back, they were returned immediately. And here is where we see a really subtle but incredibly profound principle in action. See, for most of the booty, the camels, the goods, the land, there was a very clear, formal system for dividing it up. But for the food, the prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, told his companions to just eat from it freely while they were there. It was a beautiful lesson in trusting God's provision, you know? It was about contentment, not about hoarding every single thing. So while you have this divine law providing a clear structure for fair distribution, you also see this leadership showing incredible wisdom and mercy in how it was applied. It wasn't about rigid, unthinking accounting. It was about meeting the needs of the people while still upholding a divine command. Now let's see how this same kind of principled leadership was applied to an even bigger challenge. Okay, so moving on from the material wealth, we get to something even more complex. What do you do with the people of Khaibar, the defeated population? I mean, this wasn't just about dividing up assets anymore. This was about governing people with whom there was a long and, frankly, a very difficult history. And the core of the treaty, the heart of the deal, boils down to this single number: 50%. Instead of kicking the people of Khaibar out, the prophet offered them a deal. He said, you continue to work the land you know so well, these date palm groves, and in return for your expertise and your labor, you keep half of everything you produce, 50%. Not as a tax or tribute, but as a genuine share of the profit. Now, to really grasp how remarkable this treaty was, you have to know the backstory. The sources make it clear that other tribes had betrayed treaties before, and the people of Khaibar had actually been part of a massive siege against the city of Al-Madinah. From a purely political, worldly point of view, you'd expect a harsh, punitive response. But instead, the choice was justice, not revenge. This quote, "It's just incredible." It's from one of the companions, Abdullah ibn Rawaha. He'd been sent to estimate the harvest for that 50-50 split. And the people of Khaibar actually tried to bribe him. And he got angry, for sure. But then he says this, making it crystal clear that his personal feelings, his anger, his memory of past grievances, none of it would ever be a reason to be unjust. And here's the thing. This wasn't just one man's personal code of ethics. What he said was a direct, real-world application of this core teaching from the Quran. The action taken at Khaibar became a living demonstration of this very verse. Be just, even with people you might hate, because justice itself is the goal. So if the treaty shows us justice on a huge, community-wide scale, the story of Safiyyah bint Huyai shows us mercy and dignity on a deeply, deeply personal level. Now, her father had been a leader of Khaibar, and she was taken as a captive in the aftermath. But her story was far from over. Let's just walk through this incredible journey. First, even before the battle, she has this dream that a moon falls from the sky and lands in her lap, a vision of her future. Then, instead of being treated as just another part of the spoils, she's freed and offered the choice of marriage by the prophet himself. And notice the mutual respect here. When he knelt down for her to use his knee as a step to get on her camel, she instead just placed her knee over his, refusing to actually step on him. And finally, you see the profound love of the companions. Abu Ayyub stood guard outside their tent all night long, a volunteer protector, just because he was concerned. The sources are really clear on this point. The main reason for this marriage wasn't about politics or desire. It was about honoring Safiyyah, about consoling her in her grief and saving her from a fate that would have ignored her noble standing. It was an act of profound compassion, elevating her to the incredible status of a mother of the believers. But, principal leadership doesn't just exist in a nice, neat little bubble. It's constantly being tested. So this final part of our explainer is going to look at how this leadership responded when it was faced with outright lies and even an attempt on the prophet's life. So this first case study is actually about Safiyyah herself, and it shows the amazing character she developed. One of her servants goes to the Caliph Omar and completely lies about her. So Safiyyah clears her name and then she confronts the servant. When the servant admits she was wrong, what does Safiyyah do? Instead of punishing her, she says, "Go, for you are now a free woman." Forgiveness. And then she tops it with an act of unbelievable kindness. Okay, the second test was much more severe. Some of the people of Khaibar gave a gift, a roasted sheep, that they had laced with a deadly poison. The prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, was warned. He calmly gathered the conspirators, questioned them until they confessed, and exposed the entire plot. And yet, even after a direct attempt on his life, he didn't resort to collective punishment. He didn't abandon the principles he lived by. So what does all of this add up to? The way the spoils were handled, the just treaty, the honoring of Safiyyah, the response to lies and treachery, it all points to a consistent, powerful, and truly inspiring legacy. This verse from the Quran just perfectly captures the character we've been talking about. To restrain your anger when you've been provoked. To pardon people when it would be so much easier to punish them. I mean, that is the definition of a doer of good. And the events after Khaibar are one of history's clearest examples of it in action. So, in the end, the real victory, the true spoils of Khaibar, they weren't material at all. They were moral. It was the establishment of a blueprint for how power should be used with justice for your enemies, with dignity for the defeated, and with mercy even in the face of betrayal. And this leaves us with a final, powerful thought. When every single action, from dividing up the spoils of war to contracting a marriage, is guided by this framework of compassion and justice, it shows us a leadership that's best described not as a conqueror, but as a mercy.